Father, thank you so much for this time together today. And God, we just thank you that we can just pause and learn together. I thank you for each leader on this call, what you're doing in their lives and through their lives and through their ministries. So much incredible kingdom impact is represented on this call right now, and we're so grateful for that. Father, I just pray that you would speak through Kelly in a great way today. Just have her share the things that you want her to share, and just help us to hear what you want us to hear today. And so we invite you to be a part of this gathering, and we commit it to you. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Kelly, take it away and welcome.
Well, welcome to everybody today, and thank you so much for coming in. So let's just dive right into it. So here's the agenda for today. Starting out with whose mission is it anyway, kind of a throw over to whose line is it anyway, if anybody even remembers that show anymore. So we're going to talk about how and where to find foundations for your nonprofit, what foundations really want to know about your agency, common mistakes in talking with foundations and how to avoid them, 7 steps in building and cultivating these long-term foundation relationships that we want, and how to turn grantors into true partners, and more. So I want to start out by saying that, and it's interesting that Gary's on the line. I had been working at Food for the Hungry for about 2 years in the major donor department before they had hired a new director of development. And shortly after he started, he came in and said, this is so exciting. I've got Jim Lord coming in to talk with us, and he's one of the best fundraisers ever. And you're just going to love him. He's great. He's fantastic. And we're like, okay. So we all went into the conference room, and the first thing that Jim said was, foundations have no needs. And I thought, well, either Jim's crazy or my boss is crazy. I don't know why he brought him in, but then it didn't take long for us to figure out. Jim kind of started explaining what that meant. And basically he said, the nonprofits don't have needs. Your donors have needs. Your foundations have needs. They want to support programs and organizations that are making a difference in people's lives and in their community. So, oops, let me make sure I'm with you here. Okay. So really, it's about the foundation's mission. And when you focus on helping the foundations achieve their mission, you're going to achieve your own. And then fundraising becomes, kind of what I call a grown-up conversation. You're not begging, you're not arm twisting, you're not convincing. You're talking about an investment and developing a partnership. So the example I always give is, let's say that you're the Fred Flintstone Food Bank, and your mission is to feed hungry people. And the Barney Rubble Foundation's mission is to feed hungry people. Well, you have a mission match. You both are in the same, business. So what you want to talk about is you want to offer them opportunities to invest or to donate in your organization that's going to help them achieve their mission of feeding hungry people. I like working with foundations because they're required to give money away. And as a new fundraiser, I was like, oh, individuals don't have to give their money away, but foundations do. But over the years, I love working with foundations because I just like to hear their heart. I like seeing these relationships build and these amazing partnerships that I've seen between foundations and nonprofits and in our community. So again, they're required to give away 5% of the fair market value of their endowment every year in order to be a foundation, in order to maintain their foundation status. Now, 5% may not seem like much, but in 2023, which is the most current data I was able to grab, that was $105 billion. And the top areas of interest I noticed were religion, human services, education, and health. I think those stay pretty consistent year after year after year. And then for those of you who don't know, a good balanced donor base for a nonprofit is, around 80% individual giving, 10 to 15% foundations, 5% corporations, events. There's other funding that comes in. So sometimes when people call me early on about writing grants for them and they don't really have an individual donor base set up, I'm kind of like, well, I'm not really sure you're ready for foundations yet. Plus, it's only 15%, 10 to 15% of what you're going to raise. So maybe we need to go take a step back and look at your individual donors and building them up a little bit more. So again, foundations, they don't just want to give money away. They really want a return on their investment. And, so what is that return? Well, they might want a healthy community or youth who are educated and ready to take on local jobs, historic landmark. One thing I wanted to mention about kids who are educated, just really quick. I don't know how many people on the line on this webinar are involved in any kind of education or job preparation for youth. But just as an FYI, by 2023, they're projecting that we're going to have 500,000 additional jobs available. And the companies already are saying we're concerned about having enough workers. And of course, a lot of our kids are not succeeding in school. So my advice is, if you're doing anything with youth in regard to any kind of education, literacy, anything, and or vocational training or job prep, I would do a little research, because if you can sort of show these foundations, this is our ultimate goal. We know that there's a need for the kids to be educated, but there's also a need for down the road that we need workers. And what we're going to do is help contribute to that. That's going to catch their attention, especially corporate foundations who are going to need these people. So just kind of an FYI. I don't know how many people are educating kids, but if you are, that would be fascinating research to add to your proposal. So as we develop these partnerships, these foundations begin to really feel like they're part of making an impact in the community. And what they'll do is, like, when the CEO goes back to the board to discuss the impact that the foundation made, they're not going to say, well, we helped XYZ achieve this or that. They're going to say, hey guys, last summer, we fed 500 low-income kids every day, or we helped keep 100 seniors from becoming homeless. So they're saying, we did this. And that's what you want them to do. You want them to feel that they're such a part of your organization, that this is what they accomplished. And that's really what they want to do. They want to make that impact in the community. So what they'll do, though, then, is they see you as the true partner in helping them achieve their mission and their goals and making that impact on the community. So you want to discover what their mission and philanthropic interests are and identify how they match what you do, if they match what you do. And then if they do, how exactly do they match? And then you want to let knowing what their mission is and knowing your mission match drive your conversations. Now, this is a little bit of a shift in, again, if you're kind of always trying to convince them to give to you, this is a shift in thinking. Again, it's like that grown-up conversation, as I mentioned. And it's the way that you want to do it to build the long-term relationships. It's building trust, it's building partnerships. And if you continually are showing them, we're invested in you achieving your mission too, that's how these relationships build and grow and expand, and how you bring them more and more into your organization. And we'll talk about other ways that they can be partnering with you in down the road a little bit. So
Hey, Kelly.
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in for a second. I think what you're talking about here is so important. And I love what you just said about how foundations use the word we, right? We did this year. We got something done, right, with other partners that have, like you said, a mission match.
Right.
I think sometimes when I talk to leaders, they think that I need to try to communicate with a foundation in a way that just convinces them of how great we are and why they should take their money and give it to us.
Right.
And I always say to those groups, no, you've got to start with the foundation. Why are they a foundation in the first place? Right? What do they care about? What do they want to get done in the community? And are you a mission match for that? And if you are, then I think you've got an opportunity there. So it's not all about gushing about who we are and maybe the great work that we're doing. It's understanding that foundation, what their heartbeat is, what God's call is on them, and can you help them accomplish their goals, right, and desires. So I love the reminder there.
Absolutely. What I always say is, it's talking about investments. You're not having to twist arms or beg or convince. And I'll talk about that again in just a couple minutes here. But yeah, no, great point, Jonathan. Thank you for that. So again, how do we learn about their mission and interests? Well, first we have to find them. So how do we find them? So you obviously want to find foundation whose mission matches yours. So here are some of the fee-based searchable databases that you can look at. We are really fortunate in Arizona to have the Arizona Guide to Giving. I remember when Marion Bays created this thing like 30 years ago. A lot of states don't have one that's specific to their state. So we're just really lucky that we have this. It's got about 2,000 donors in it, foundations and corporate foundations, and it's searchable. And by that, I mean, what you can do, it doesn't really require any training. You just go in there, and essentially what you just do is put in like a keyword, and then you hit search, and then it'll come up with a list of potential foundation funders. And then if you get hundreds, then obviously you can put in some other keywords like, youth, or maybe even a geographic area, so that you take out the ones that only fund in Tucson, for example. And then you get these the list of foundations, and then you can actually create profiles, and I'll talk more about that in a second. There's also the foundation directory online, which I believe is going by Candid now. Great resource. It's got foundations from all over the country. It's a little pricey, but what I do is, if I need to do a broader search outside of Arizona for a client, you can actually go in and buy like I guess you call it a subscription. Sign up for like a monthly subscription, and then do all your research in a month and then cancel it. And I think it's like $200. And I forgot to mention, with the Arizona Guide to Giving, it's free with your membership to AZ Impact for Good, which I always think is the best way to access it. But you can actually get a subscription without becoming an AZ Impact member, but that's $325 for a standalone subscription. The memberships range anywhere from, I think, 114 to up to 1,300. So if you find out that you can have a membership that's less than 325, then I would just go for the whole thing rather than a separate one. Two other fee-based searchable databases are GrantStation and Instrumental. They might be a little bit cheaper, so you can check them out. And oftentimes, if you call them, they'll give you like maybe a 30-day free trial or something. It's a good way to kind of check them out and see what you think. Again, what you do is you just use these keywords to do your search, as I mentioned. Then you're going to receive these. So you get the list of foundations, and then when you click on them, you get what we call a profile. And the profile will have the name, the phone number, the board members, interests, all kinds of stuff like that on it. Once you read over this preliminary profile, if it looks like it's a decent fit, then go ahead and save it and download it to your computer. And then you'll just keep doing that as you go through them and go through them and go through them. And then that's kind of our starting point for identifying the foundations that we might want to be able to approach.
Hey, Kelly, can I
Sure,
add one thing here?
of course.
There's another free thing that you can do that's a little bit out of the box, so to speak. But think about the work that you're doing, and think about if there are other organizations that are doing similar work as yours. And then what you can do is you can go and look at that organization's 990. 990s are public information. And if those organizations have received any grants, they'll be listed on their 990.
Right.
And so now you can generate sort of a list of, hey, this organization does similar work to us. They received grants, this past year from, these two or three foundations. So maybe those two or three foundations would be interested in our work as well. So that's just sort of an off the books free way that you can do a tiny bit of research as well. But I love, Kelly, what you said about the subscription side of it, right? You might look at things and go, wow, I don't want to pay $200 a month, $2,400 a year for a subscription here. But what Kelly said was you can go month to month. And so get that subscription for 1 month, front load all of your research, get everything you need, and then move on from there. And that's a more affordable way to handle that. So love all that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, here's some other free grant resources that you can take a look at. Some of these don't necessarily, you can't really search them necessarily for the funder name, but you can search them for a specific grant. If you're looking for a federal grant, grants.gov is the place to go. And the good thing about them is you can search by department. So if you are looking for a health-related grant, you can go in there and you can actually put down in your search that you want to look at grants from the Department of Health and Human Services or the Department of Education, because there's a lot of grants on there. And if you don't narrow it down a little bit, you're going to be inundated. You can also look for grants that are open, and you can look for grants that have closed, which is not a bad idea, because you might go, we missed this deadline, but this grant might come out again next year, and it came out around April. So now you can set up a reminder to go back and check the next year around that time to see if that grant came back out again. Grant Gopher, it's their light version is free. I haven't checked it out, but I believe that will be searchable. And Grant Watch is good. It's not free, but it's only $199 a year, which is a bargain. So if you want to check that out, you can do that. Another great free resource is newsletters, and I get a lot of these fed to me. So Grants Alert, Grant Station, the Arizona State Procurement Office, which seems kind of weird, but they actually do put state grants on that website, even though it's mostly for services that the city wants to buy, like repaving places and things like that. There's the Association of Fundraising Professionals weekly newsletter, and I don't think you have to be a member because I'm not right now, and I get that. There's funds for NGOs, but I'll tell you one really excellent one that I would encourage everybody to sign up for is Vitalist. I don't know if anybody's heard of Vitalist, but it's VITALYST, and they and maybe somebody knows and you can put it in the chat. It's either monthly or bi-monthly. They send out their sort of their newsletter, and they list a ton of grants that are coming due, public, private, state, county, city, the tribes. And so it's a great resource to look at, because then they usually will include the link to the website or even to the application form. So I would really encourage everybody to subscribe to that, and you just go to the vitalist.org, I think, and there should be a link there that you can sign up. Okay. So let's talk about these profiles for a minute. The profiles are really sort of the starting point, or the big picture, and I'll explain that. Essentially, these databases, any searchable database, there's somebody that's going to, as Jonathan mentioned, to the foundation's 990, and they're looking through all the grants they give, and they're determining which keywords to put into their database for people to search from. So they might go in there and say, oh, I see some health grants, I see some education grants. So I'm going to say that they have an interest in health, they have an interest in education, those types of things. But they don't, but that doesn't really necessarily give you the real picture of what they actually fund. It gives you the broad look. But for example, they might say, oh, I see that they funded a senior center, so I'm going to say that they fund seniors. Well, then when you actually go in and do a little more digging, you might find out that of all the grants they give one to one specific senior center year after year after year. And that could be something based on a board member that has a relationship with somebody. So that's why you have to drill down further, and that's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of slides. So as we keep doing this research, we're going to see if this profile says what they fund is really what they do fund based on their grants, the grants that they've given. So again, we want to keep researching, and we'll talk about how to do that. One of the things that I mentioned here is a profile that maybe says that they fund education, and you're like, this is great, let's apply. And then you find out that maybe they only fund preschool, and you're looking for funding for scholarships, or maybe they only fund college and you're looking for pre-K. So it's really important to move forward. But I will always say the profiles are the best starting point. And also, in addition to telling you at least their interests or the broader picture of their interests, again, you get the contact person's name a lot of times, you get the address, the phone number, all kinds of things that you really need and you're going to be needing as you build these relationships. So where can you get more information? Well, go to their website. One of the other things about them taking information from the 990 is a lot of times the 990s that are posted online that they're going to do their research to put this into their databases, those are 2 years old, 5 years old. And sometimes foundations will either change their mission or change their focus or add new areas that they're focusing more on, and they're maybe phasing out some of these other ones. So it's really important. That's a great place to get the most current information on what their giving is. So to get even more specific information and to start building your relationships, let's use AI, but not AI. So what I'm talking about are appreciative inquiry questions. And I really resent artificial intelligence because I've always said AI, and now I've got to maybe say AIQ. I don't know. So let's talk just a little bit, though, about making these calls. I'm going to suggest that you call them to get more information. But I will tell you that there are a lot of people that don't want to call foundations. And I understand it. I've talked to people and I've said, what's the problem? They go, well, I don't want to call and get rejected. And I said, well, wouldn't you rather know up front than go to all the work to write a proposal and get everything and send it to them and then be rejected? It just makes more sense. And the other thing about calling foundations that I learned a long time ago was because a lot of people don't like to call, when you do, you sort of are elevated in their eyes. They're like, this is that group that called us and asked us these questions. And you're letting them know that what you're trying to do is just get more specific information. Because ultimately, you don't want to waste their time sending a proposal that's not a fit. Okay, so I make sure that I'm staying on target here. So when you call them, and you want to start asking some of these open-ended questions to gather a little more information. So things like, tell me about your mission and history. Now, they might be like, well, didn't you look on our website and see? And you can get the basics, but you can say, well, I just kind of want to get a little bit more information about that. And again, what are your specific interests? You could say, I see that you have an interest in education. Can you tell me a little bit more about like your target audience? I love to ask, what do you think was the foundation's most significant gift and why? And I've gotten some great answers. So this is just kind of saying, I want to know really what you think it was. And some will say, we really kind of have been highlighting the fact that we funded this capital campaign. But I got to tell you, I think the most significant one was this small school in this rural community that we funded that just didn't have any of the basics. And now they're doing great and they've got all the new technology. So it's good to hear about everything they fund, but it's really good to get that person's insight. And when I say the person, I'm talking about either the president or the grants manager. And you should be able to find the contact name in the profile, but sometimes it's not there. So if you can't find it, you just call the foundation and ask for the person in charge of grants. And then ask them, what impact did that most significant gift have? Just again, to kind of get their perspective on it. And then if the conversation is going well and you feel like the person is open, that's when you can ask a little bit more about his or her history with the organization. Again, a lot of times, we look at these foundations as a check writing, agency, and people just don't really express their interest in why they were founded and what their heart is and what they think their most significant gift was. And just by asking these questions, they're like, clearly this nonprofit is interested in us beyond, a check. So I like to ask these questions, what brought you there? What interested you most when you started? What about what you're doing now is the most interesting, and why do you think it is? And that's a good question because I've had them say, we have really focused on this over the years, but just so you know, we're actually phasing this out a little bit and we're working more towards this area instead. So at that point, you can make a decision. If they say, yeah, we're interested in feeding hungry people, but now we're going to start focusing on, preschool because we need to make sure these kids are ready for kindergarten. And we're going to continue the hunger thing for another year or two, but then we're really going to go full tilt in this other direction. So then you kind of go, well, now should I pursue this foundation? Because in 2 years, they're not going to be funding this anymore, or not. So if it's something we, for sure it's going to be another 2, maybe 3 years, why not? Why not continue to learn a little bit more about them and maybe go ahead and apply? But it's great to ask these questions because then you can get kind of a heads up on where things are going. And then, what about the mission and work are you most interested in today? You ask them what they were interested in when they started, and now as things are changing, or if things are changing, what are they the most interested in? Take a sip because I'm getting gravelly voice here.
Kelly,
Lovely.
I just want to echo what you've been saying about the relationship with foundations. In the creation of a performing arts nonprofit, we were dialoguing with the Virginia Piper Foundation, and they basically communicated, "Hey, you're on the right track. However, we want to see a 3-year minimum track record before we move forward in that granting process." And so it was great to know in advance, like you said, you're not working on doing all this grant writing to find out that you got to wait another couple of years, but you've got your foot in the door that they know who you are.
That's a great point. And the other thing with, did you say Pulliam or Piper?
Virginia Piper.
Yeah, I think Piper's the one too that offers the Grant Writing 101 course, and they will ask you if you attended it. So you definitely want to do that before you call them even. And then you can ask them again, where would you like to see the foundation direct its giving over the next 5 years and why? And when I ask that question, I try to couch it around the specific area that I'm working in that matches their mission. So we might say, what area of early childhood education do you want to see the foundation direct its giving over the next 5 years? It's still good to get the big picture, and maybe they'll give you the big picture, but then you can sort of drill down and say, well, that's great. What about in the area of education? And then if everything goes well and the conversation, it looks like we are a match and everything, I conclude by saying, it sounds like our XYZ program aligns with your interest in child hunger. Should we submit a grant request? And I'll tell you, about 85% of the time they say, yes, you should. And then I'll say, okay, and then I'll ask them, are the guidelines on your website? Is that something that you could email to me? And they'll tell you what the process is, even if you might already know what it is. And if they say that their process is to submit a letter of intent or a letter of inquiry, or however you call it, LOI, when you write that letter, make sure that your first sentence is, thank you so much for talking with me the other day and for your great wisdom or whatever, so that they go, when this one comes across their desk, they go, oh yeah, I remember I talked to that guy the other day. Now, I will say that you don't have to ask all of these questions. It's a lot of questions to ask. And you might get a sense that they're like trying to, not necessarily get you off the phone, but they're tired of answering questions. So just find out what you can and make your notes. And if you don't get to number 8, that's okay. Because you can always talk to them again. It's all about relationship building. You don't meet somebody and marry them 10 minutes later. So you need time to build this relationship. And one of the things that my old boss always said is there's never a bad communication with the foundation. So if you have to call again and maybe reference the conversation, say, I had a couple more questions or whatever. But yeah, you don't have to always get to 8. Eventually you will get to 8 though. But get as much as you can out of them for the time that you're talking with them. Now, we talked a lot about their interests. Now let's talk about what they want to know about your organization. They usually they want to know about, and let me say, before I go into that, let me say this, the things that we're going to cover, these are things that you should have in your head, so that, I guess maybe you want to call it an elevator speech, so that at any time, if a donor asks you, you should be able to answer to each one of these things. I think there's about 9 of them here. And then the other thing is, you should really have these written down somewhere, because you can use them for your proposals. A lot of these questions are asked, and it's easier. You can just copy and paste your responses and those types of things. But these are just things that we should all know about our organization. So the first one is the background information. Who founded it? Why? What needs are you addressing? And what are your recent accomplishments? This is, I love this question in a proposal, and even when you're talking with a donor, because it really gives you a chance to show the heart of the founder. There's all kinds of stories out there about how nonprofits were founded. I don't know if you're familiar with John Van Hengel over at St. Mary's Food Bank. Just real quick, he was a volunteer, and he went outside one day and saw this woman taking canned items and some other things out of a dumpster behind a grocery store. And he walked over and said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I've got 10 kids, and their health hasn't been great because I can't afford to feed them. So what I found is that these grocery stores are throwing away canned items that are just barely past the expiration date or not even past the expiration date, and prepared foods, prepared meats and things like that are completely wrapped up, completely, they're not being harmed by sitting at the top of the dumpster. And she said, I've been taking this food home and I've been preparing meals for my kids, and their health has improved dramatically. So John walked away, and he was thinking about that, and he thought to himself, what we need in the community is a bank, someplace where people who have excess food can donate it, and a place where people who need that food can come and withdraw it. And he founded St. Mary's not too long after that, which is now, was the first food bank in the world. We've got zillions of food banks now in the country, and he actually helped also found Feeding America. So it's a great story. We share it with a lot of the proposals. So it's great. And there's just all kinds of wonderful stories like that. A lot of times, when they say, tell us about your history, you say, oh, well, we were founded in, 2015, and then you go on to something else. No, take a little time. If you've got a great story, share that story for sure. Another question that you'll be asked in proposals as well as in person is, do you have a strategic plan? Kind of where are you at what phase are you at, stage are you at? Foundations in proposals will actually ask you to send it. So this is why it's really important to have a strategic plan and make sure that you're staying on track with it. They may ask where your funding comes from. I think we mentioned earlier, yeah, we did, the different places. So individuals, foundations, corporations, civic groups, faith-based agencies, events, all of that, in-kind donations, all that. Okay. One question that they often will ask is, what percentage of your board members donate, and how else are they involved? This is a question that, well, first of all, you should make sure that 100% of your board members are giving. And you can also offer them like a give or get, which, if you're not familiar with that, you might say, okay, every board member has to give $5,000 a year or get a donation of $5,000 a year. So for example, some board members, they might not donate personally, but they might work with a company or be the head of a company, and they could do a corporate donation instead. And the reason that you want 100% is the foundations will say, well, why should we donate when 100% of your board isn't giving? So if they don't have faith in you, why should we? I mean, obviously they have faith, but they're like, well, why should we give if they're not giving? And so it's a tough question to answer. So be sure that I really encourage you to make sure that you're getting 100%. Financial health, a lot of foundations will ask for your audit, your 990. They'll ask if you're using sound financial practices like GAAP. So you want to be able to discuss that with them. And if you're not in the best financial situation, you can talk about it. Where you're at, where you're going, and what your plan is to fix it. It's really good to be honest, especially with your current foundation donors, especially. Here's where we're at, and here's where we're working towards, to make sure that they see that you're working towards fixing anything. And then partnerships, again, that's another one that's becoming more important to foundations. They want to know that you're not the only person out there. They want to know who you're partnering with. How are you partnering? Are you avoiding duplication in the community through these partnerships? And I just always recommend, once again, it's easier to kind of write this down and have it somewhere for proposals and to talk with foundations. Think about all the people who are partnering with you. That includes other nonprofits, volunteers, in-kind donors, civic groups, anybody that's coming out to help with anything with your organization, or maybe you actually are working with a nonprofit on a shared program, or a program that you're both kind of targeting the same group, but you're working together, so it's not being duplicative. Those are the things that you want to keep track of and share with your foundation donors. Community support. Is it a community? Do they support you? Are they involved? Are they volunteering with you? Are they donating? And how do you keep them informed about your programs? That's an easy one, via social media, other ways that you keep them involved. But this is another one of those gut punch questions that you could be asked. And this is why you really want to be aware of this, because I've heard them ask, did you ask the community if they wanted you, or did you just assume that your programs were going to come in and solve their problems? Yeah, you really don't want to be asked that. So if you don't know the history of your organization, go back and find out. And I'm guessing that most of the organizations that were established in this town came about for a reason. There was a community need. Most of the time when I've gone back with new clients and they do a little digging, yes, we absolutely did meet with some community leaders, with the schools, with the civic groups, etc. They really did want us to come in. They helped us from the very beginning. So be ready with that one, because that's a toughie to answer if you don't know the response for it. And again, finally, how does your work benefit the people in the communities that the foundation cares about? So if somebody asks you about what impact are you making, talk about the broader impact. But if you've already done your research and you know that this foundation, for example, might have a particular heart for this one community, or maybe this school, then what you'll want to do is, give them the big picture, but also specifically mention those people who are benefiting that they care about, so they can see what you're doing and know that you really are aligned with what they want to fund and the people that they want to assist. I can't see the chat, Jonathan and Heather. Are there any questions anybody wants to jump in with?
Just a lot of good conversations going on. Heather and I are weighing in on a few things, and
Okay.
people are thumbs upping things and agreeing with things and all that, but no specific questions right now. So I would say keep firing away.
All right. Thank you. Good job. So this goes back now to kind of what Jonathan was saying is, common mistakes in talking with foundations. Again, don't try to convince them to give to you. Don't try to sell your programs. A few slides back, I talked about how nonprofits, they don't like to call the foundations, even though they really should. So I always wondered about that. I'm like, even if I tell them, but you're talking about investing in these types of things. Well, what I kind of finally figured out is the real reason that they're not doing it is because they haven't changed that mindset. They still think that that's what they need to do to get funding. They have to convince the donor. And so when they think about calling the foundation, they're looking at this as a cold call. Well, nobody likes to do cold calls. They're no fun. You worry about being rejected. So this is again where I keep reminding them, you're not cold calling, you're not selling, you're not trying to convince them. It's a partnership. It's that grown-up conversation that you really want to have with these foundations. So
Hey,
when you look at
Kelly,
it, yes,
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, one of the reasons why foundations like to be contacted, right, Kelly, is they are looking for partners. And so think about it as you helping them,
right.
right? When you are reaching out to them to learn more about who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, and if you're the right fit for them, that's helpful for the foundations. Remember, they're actively trying to figure out how to give money away, which means they are actively looking for partners. So when you initiate that conversation and you reach out, that's very helpful for them. So maybe that's a little bit of a mindset shift that you're not bothering them, you're actually helping them by communicating with them.
Absolutely. Again, that mission match, focusing on their mission. And because so many groups don't have that mentality, you again sort of rise to the top like the cream. It's like you're not calling to convince or arm twist. You're saying, hey, we can help you achieve your mission. And that's a much easier conversation. It's a much more fun conversation. And it's really the beginnings of this long-term relationship that you want to establish. So other common mistakes is dominating the conversation or interrupting. I always tell people, try to talk for about 80, excuse me, let the foundation talk for about 80% of the time, and you talk for about 20, especially when you're getting to know them. Don't interrupt. People don't like that. You don't like it. And that's a good way to kind of make a bad impression. Don't challenge them if they don't think you're a fit. Might seem a pretty simple concept. And I'll just tell you briefly, I had a client that did challenge a major foundation in town, and kept saying, well, I don't understand. I really think we're a fit. And the person tried to explain, he goes, I don't really understand. I really think we're a fit. And I'm just cringing as he's telling me the story. And then finally he said, yeah, soon after I asked her the third time, the conversation was over. And so when I came to work with them, it had been a few years. And he said, do you think we should go back and talk with them? I said, well, not you. So I gave him a new strategy, and now all these years later, they have been able to go back, which is wonderful. But yeah, you really don't want to make your donors mad, especially if you're just trying to get to know them. So to avoid common mistakes, and just like Jonathan just said, if you keep their mission in mind, keep the fact that you're helping them, you're being the conduit for them to achieve it. You're talking about investing, you're talking about being a partner. That's going to keep you from falling back into this convincing or begging mode. And honestly, it's really tough not to do that. I mean, we are excited about our programs. We love what we're doing. We get to see these faces every day and the changes that we're making. And you go in there and you just want to go, oh my gosh, you guys, you really need to invest. This is an amazing program, and all these wonderful things are happening. But you really don't want to do that, because if you focus on their mission, you're going to help them achieve their mission, and they're going to get excited about it too. Like we said earlier, hey, board, we fed 500 kids every day last year, low income kids that you wouldn't have probably had a meal if we hadn't stepped in to help them with this. So, they'll get excited about your programs in time, but you really want to really focus on them. Discuss how your programs are addressing needs and improving lives of the people that they want to help. Watch the donor's body language when you're talking. This is when you are sitting with them face to face. And I'll give you an example. There was this woman with another large foundation years ago. I think she's long since left. Wonderful, wonderful woman, very warm. I really enjoyed meeting with her. My clients would take me along a lot. And but I would tell them, okay, here's the thing, watch her body language. She's going to give you all kinds of great advice about how to apply, and if you're really a fit or not, and if you should advance. She'll give you advice on things that you should do with the program that you maybe hadn't even thought about. She's wonderful. You really want to learn from her. So don't, make sure you're watching her body language, because what's going to happen is this. If she thinks that you're not listening to her, you're talking over her, you're interrupting her, you're kind of going, yeah, that's great, but, she's going to kind of sit back on her chair. She's going to cross her arms. And once she crosses her arms, you're in damage control. So what you need to do is you need to get her to uncross those arms. And the best way to do that is to realize that you're talking too much, that she's tuning out. And now you want to start asking her some questions and get her re-engaged in the conversation. And she'll come right back in. She'll jump in where she left off. She'll keep giving you advice. and then she'll help you know when to apply and all these wonderful things. So watch the body language. The other thing I talk about is, again, the golden rule. Treat them the way that you want to be treated. One example is, I mean, how many times have you donated to a nonprofit and not gotten a receipt or not gotten a phone call? Is that everybody pretty much? Yeah, it's annoying. You don't necessarily stop giving just because you didn't hear from them, but you kind of are like, they really should have thanked me for that gift, especially if it was a substantial gift. So think about that with foundations. You want to really make sure that you're being kind, you're listening to them, all those things that just treat them the way that you want to be treated. Don't not send a receipt letter or something like that. Make sure that you're nurturing them and building that relationship. And as far as, if you make a mistake, say something wrong, it's okay. Relationship building takes time. You're going to have other opportunities to talk with these donors. And like I said, my old boss said, he made me actually call after I had made a mistake. I said, I think I forgot to send this, or I did something that I forgot. And he goes, well, call him. And I'm like, call him? I don't want to call him. I made a mistake. And he goes, call him and tell him you made a mistake and that you want to fix it. And the donor could not have been lovelier. He said, yeah, no, just send that back over to us. You're fine. And he said, because every time you call, you're building that relationship. No matter what the reason is, you're building that relationship. And that was wonderful advice.
Kelly, before you
Kelly,
move on.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Heather, jump in. Go for it.
Yeah, there were a couple of comments and points and then a question in here just to throw out. When you were talking about that story, I thought Leilani had a great response, but if people haven't caught it, it's really it's something to consider. She said, what if the guy, instead of challenging their fit assessment, would actually demonstrate that they've been listening and say that you would reach out to other organizations in the community that might actually be a stronger fit to recommend them back to them. And I thought, wow, that definitely shows that you are listening rather than defending. And it might make them more curious about you and your organization. Like you said, building a relationship rather than shutting one down. Any comment on that idea that Leilani shared? And then I'll ask another question that Sarah brought up.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment. I don't know so much that the foundation doesn't already know all the nonprofits in town that they would want to support, but you're right. It definitely shows them that you were listening. And I think that could have been a good way for him to sort of get himself out of trouble at that point. But yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I
especially
would
if it's
just, sorry,
go
Heather, I was
ahead,
just
John.
going to say, I had a situation like that come up where I was talking to a foundation, but they weren't in the Phoenix area. They were back east. And so as I talked to them a little bit more and learned about their focus and what they want to get done, it seemed right for me to say, hey, now that I know what you're all about, there are a lot of groups out here in the Phoenix community that I think would be a good fit for you guys. Are you okay if I pass on your foundation name and website and contact information? And they were like, absolutely, please do that. We need great partners all over the country. So it was a little bit of that, right? And it worked because they were in a different area and they weren't
Yes.
as familiar with Phoenix.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because again, this was a major
Mhm.
foundation that knew everybody. But no, I like that idea. I think that was a great thing to tell them.
Yeah, and that if it is a smaller foundation, they might not know everybody. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
here's Sarah's question, and I think this is one that a lot of people do ask is how do you handle the absence of a formal strategic plan if something like that isn't in place or hasn't been developed and you're talking to a foundation?
If you don't have a formal strategic plan, you probably have something informal that you can put together, especially if you don't want to put something together ahead of time or you're not at that stage in your organization where you really have done that. You could hold off. If somebody asks you for it, you can say, let me put something together for you. We don't actually have a formal one at this point, and then just go ahead and put something together based on your goals and those types of things. And then you can, send them a couple page document and even say, this is going to be the foundation for our strategic plan that we plan to start putting together in the next year or so.
Yeah, and remember why they're asking that question, right?
Yes.
They want to know, do you have direction? Do you have clarity on what you're doing and right for us, what God's called us to do? And so right, the other thing they're trying to find out is, are you going to steward the resources well? Are those resources going to be used for a specific purpose to get a strategic plan and goals right accomplished and reached? So there's sort of a number of questions they're asking, right, Kelly, when they're asking
Yes.
about if you have a strategic plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And one thing, Kelly, you've said, I've heard you in a number of different situations say this, is that one of the best people to answer those kinds of questions is the person that's at the helm, the CEO, the ED, whatever title that person is, instead of it being the grant writer necessarily, to say, how would they answer it? Because they have likely something in mind that is directing it, though it may not be in a formal way, but to really find out, how do we want to answer this question,
Yes.
even if you don't have that formal thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say, honestly, I would never encourage an organization to have their grant writer call the foundation because they want to talk with their peer. So if you're going to take their busy time, then you want your, your top board member, your CDO, your president to be the one making these calls. And usually it's the CDO, the chief development officer, or yeah, who's doing that. So not that there's anything wrong with grant writers. I'm a grant writer, but they don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to their peer.
mhm. Yeah, that's a good representation of that. Yeah, a lot of good other comments in here. I won't go through them because I want to give you time, but really good input as everyone's reading through the different chat ideas.
Right. Okay.
Kelly, just one more thing. I just want
Sure.
to jump in and just highlight when you talk about treating people the way you'd like to be treated. I have a really good friend of mine that runs a foundation and she gives away a lot of money every year. And a big sticking point for her, and I've heard her say this to me many times, she would say, Jonathan, you cannot believe how many times we will give a grant, right? A significant major gift, and we will never hear back from that organization
Yeah.
on the impact of that gift or the good that came out of it, or anything at all like that. And of course, they said, that absolutely factors into whether or not we
Yeah.
will even consider a second
Yes.
gift to a group like that. It reached a point with her a few years ago that she was almost surprised in a
Mm,
great way when organizations would get back to her and take the time to report on impact in a detailed way. It,
yeah.
it, it was that rare, which I think
Yeah.
is really sad. So we want to make sure that we are handling this relationship well, stewarding it well, and giving people the feedback and the results that they deserve from
Yes.
giving a gift like they're giving.
Absolutely. And I've heard stories like that too, Jonathan. It just breaks my heart because again, if you change your shift to this as building a long-term relationship, you're not going to do those things because you wouldn't not call your family, you would not report back to your family on things that you discussed. So it is. And when they invest that much money in you, the least you can do is provide an update. It's really not good fundraising at all. Okay, so just to wrap this up, relationship building does take time. And again, you're going to have other opportunities to talk with the donor. So let's talk about some steps to building and cultivating these long-term relationships. There's more than 7 steps. These are the 7 that I like. Calling and inviting them. You want to call after you send a proposal or report. Did you receive it? Do you have any questions? You want to ask them for coffee or lunch. Invite them to tour your programs or facilities. Ask if you can visit theirs. Send cards on birthdays and other occasions. Just look at them as, again, friendship, relationship building. This is what you do with your friends. Ask your friends out to lunch. So you want to do that with these foundations as well. Call for reasons other than a donation. If any of you have kids in college, I don't have to explain that at all, because you know what that's like when your kid only calls when they want money. Talk about other ways that they can get involved. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit later too, but I'm talking about sort of at this beginning level for this. So maybe you can offer ways that they can volunteer. If you're St. Mary's, you could have them come down and pack some food boxes. Maybe they can provide some training. For example, let's say that you do financial management courses for young adults or maybe even kids in high school. And you've got a corporate foundation that you've been working with, or you're just starting to work with. And you could say, would you be willing to come down and be a guest speaker in one of our classes to talk about banking? So maybe like, for example, if it's a local foundation, a corporate foundation like Wells Fargo, would somebody be willing to come down and talk about how to open a checking account, talk about some of the basics of balancing a budget, those types of things. So that's kind of good to kind of, when you're just starting to get to know them a little bit, kind of get them a little more involved. You want to thank donors 7 times for their gift. Obviously, you want to give them a call to thank them. You thank them in the acknowledgement letter. You thank them when you send the report. You thank them before you apply for the next grant. It's 7 gets there a lot faster than you think. So just, try to remember to try to thank them at least 7 times for their gift. And here's the thing again, where you can provide an update whether they ask for a report or not. And just to kind of piggyback on what Jonathan was saying, when I was at Food for the Hungry, there was a foundation that gave us this small grant every year. And I think it was like $3,000. And so we would send the reports. We just always sent a report a year later. So I called them one year, I don't remember why, and they said, I want to tell you something. We are kind of phasing away from international giving, and we've been doing this for a couple of years, but they said the reason that we keep giving to you is you're the only organization that sends us a report. So again, yeah, that's so important to do that. And that was why, so really they should have cut us off a couple of years, but they didn't, because they were so thankful that somebody was getting back with them. You can also invite them as bringing them in a little bit closer. You can invite them to your functions and celebrations, like maybe a graduation, grand openings. I had a group that just opened up a new program at their facilities that was called the Restoring Dignity Room, and they had an open house, and a lot of the foundations came out and loved it. You can give them also, if they've been giving it to you for a couple of years, you can give them a small gift that doesn't cost very much. It's very meaningful to them. We just did one of my clients. I said, let's give them a nice little plaque. It was like $35. But other things that they really love are maybe like a collage of letters from the children you serve, or a video of the beneficiaries who are thanking them. And I mean something like maybe a 3-minute video. Maybe you go into a senior center that you're supporting or that you're doing programs in, and you ask, for the people to just say, hey, we're making a video for XYZ Foundation. They funded these different programs. Would you thank them? And, this one might say, oh my gosh, thank you for this. I love the meals. I hate to cook. I love coming here just for the meals. And maybe the next one will say that they're doing some vocational training. I love this. I'm enjoying this part of it. So just each one of them, just give a brief thank you for the aspect of the funding that impacted them the most. 3-minute video. And then you just tell them, hey, I want to send you this video. It was made especially for you guys, and send it off, and they'll love it. Doesn't cost you anything but a little time. So I asked a couple of my colleagues who I really respect I told them about today, and I asked them to give me just some quotes about what they think about the best way to approach foundations. And this is from Jasmine Hall, the CDO at Elevate Phoenix. And she said, relationships are everything. In terms of foundations, make sure you discover their why to ensure there's mission alignment. Again, that's the mission. Before you discuss a grant, you don't want to waste their time or yours, which goes back to the golden rule thing. If they're not a fit, then, you don't want to try to make them fit a square peg into your round hole. It's just not going to work. So be respectful of that. This is a quote that I actually pulled Lonnie Ostrom. I don't know if anybody remembers Lonnie, but he was an amazing fundraiser, a wonderful man, worked with ASU forever. And he said that relationship fundraising is the building and fostering of enduring relationships between the charitable organization and its donor public. The focus is not only on raising money, but also on satisfying shared values and achieving common objectives. Lonnie would show up at AFP meetings and talk about this, and he was always so articulate. And a lot of people get a much better understanding of how to work with donors because of Lonnie. So how to turn grantors into true partners. And this is where now I'm going to talk a little bit more about this family concept. The longer these foundations are giving to you, the more you're investing in them, the more the partnership is expanding, the more you want them to feel like they're really part of your family, part of your organization. And I like to use the word family. So as you build these relationships and trust, you begin to bring them closer in and offer them different opportunities and things. So now, as far as the first one, being responsive to their calls and texts, that should be for every foundation, whether no matter what stage they're at with you. But you always do want to be really responsive. If they're texting you, then get back with them as fast as you can. Don't wait, a day or so. That makes them feel like, you don't value them. But now when we're talking about engaging them, let's talk about more significant opportunities, like maybe have them speaking at your fundraising event to talk about your partnership, and how they know that the partnership really helped improve the community. Ask them to introduce you to other funders, or they might even say to you, XYZ Foundation in town also funds this. Have you approached them before? And you might be like, well, we weren't aware of them, or no, we haven't. And he's like, well, I know, Bill over there, and say, well, would you be willing to do an e-invite or do a Zoom so we can kind of get to know them a little bit? And really in town, all the foundations kind of know each other. So that's great when somebody offers that to you. And you also can invite them to exclusive events, things that are only kind of being attended by your staff and your board and some really major donors and major foundation donors. So make them feel that they're, again, part of that, the family. So you want to continue to build that trust and commitment on both sides. And then again, as they're getting closer and getting more engaged and you get to know them because, you know, you want to bring in board members that you know and trust. You can ask them to join the board, ask them to serve in advisory capacity, maybe ask them to provide some training to your staff or beneficiaries. And then the difference between this kind of training, it'd be something like if one of the board members of a foundation, for example, maybe he is the head of an HR consulting firm, and you have HR issues, or you have maybe some policies, anything where you just really need to train the staff on those types of issues, that would be a good time to invite them to come in and provide that training for you, because you've gotten to know them really well and you trust them with, you know, proprietary things and that kind of stuff. So ask them for input and advice based on their experience. You know, they've worked with a lot of groups, they've funded a lot of similar programs. You might say, you know, this program that you've been funding, it's going gangbusters, we're doing a great job, but you know, we're kind of bumping into this one issue. And you know, what do you think about it? Have you seen this before? And what advice would you have? Kind of again, showing that they're a true partner, helping with their needs. There's a foundation that at Food for the Hungry, it was kind of a foundation. But anyway, the gentleman that ran it, he was an older man, and it was either about his son or his grandson, but basically he had spent his life building his fortune. And as he was doing that, he came across a lot of situations, people in need, and he really got a heart for philanthropy. But he saw it as he was out there building building up his wealth and all the things he was investing in, all the things he was doing to build this company. But he would see the need in the community firsthand. And he was talking with our CDO, and he said, you know, my son's going to inherit my wealth in the business. He's not going to go through what I did, and he's not going to develop a sense of philanthropy the way I did, but I want him to really understand it and appreciate it. But I don't know really what to say. I don't really know how to help him. And so my boss told me, and we did a little research, and we came up with some articles and a book on second generation wealth. And he packed it up and sent it to him. And he was just over the moon that we had done that for him, because he really didn't know where else to look. So he was so thankful. But again, we were helping with his need. It had nothing to do with his giving. It had all to do with helping his son or grandson. So just kind of watch for those opportunities where you can really give back. And then another thing is reaching out when a crisis impacts the people that you serve, because they're investing in those people. And this one is a quickie, again, at Food for the Hungry. We had a earthquake somewhere, I don't remember where it was. And we were busy with a bunch of stuff. And then the next day I called one of the foundations to talk about a donation. And I only probably got about a sentence out before he said, "What took you so long to call me?" And I was like, oh, and I was kind of embarrassed because I hadn't called him sooner, which I should have done. But the other thing that I thought about with this is, isn't this amazing that he felt such a part of our organization and such a valued part, that he was like, you know, you should have called me right away. You know, he's like part of the family, again, if I can use that analogy. He's part of the family. You should have called me first. And he made a donation, but I never forgot that lesson. And then contact them when something big happens at the organization, a leadership change, a new high profile project, a big new partnership, anything like that. Let them know what's going on. And I'm going to conclude with this quote from Lisa Notero at St. Mary's Food Bank, who I think is one of the best fundraisers in the state. So I asked her about this, and I said, you know, what can I say at this presentation? And she said, foundation fundraising is all about the relationship you maintain beyond the gift. When something exciting happens, an anniversary, a milestone is reached, an article is written, tell your top foundations and send them copies or direct them to a website. She said, essentially, if something happens at your agency that is exciting enough to tell your friend, your best friend, tell your top foundations. Now, she said that's cool enough to tell your friends, but I thought, well, I'm just going to say exciting. So that's where I'm done here, and I can throw it back over to Jonathan if we want to do some more questions, or if anybody has more questions.
Yeah, Kelly, you know, you said something that I've never thought about a couple minutes ago. You said that foundations talk to each other. They know each other. I've never really thought about that. And so, right, think about that. If you don't handle a relationship well, or you don't report on impact or things like that, that there's a chance there's going to be a ripple effect of that, right? As other
Yes.
foundations reach out to their friends and say, hey, we're considering this organization. I see that you gave to them. What was that experience like? That seems like such a simple concept. I've just never thought of it. that foundations talk to each other. So we've
Yes.
got to make sure to handle those relationships well.
We're
So
Phoenix is it's a big community, but it is a small nonprofit community.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelly, this has been just fantastic. Thank you so much for all this great information. Kelly, oh, how can people reach out to you further if they have additional questions, or what if they want to talk to you about your grant writing services and different things like that? I see you've got a slide up. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and feel free to call anytime. The office, I'm old fashioned. I still have the landline. So you can call the office or the cell anytime. If you have any needs or any questions, I'm always happy. I always say advice is free. If you have any questions about the presentation, or if you're getting ready to maybe call a foundation and want a little advice, give me a call. I'll be happy to walk you through it. Yeah, otherwise you can go to my website. It's a little under construction, but it's mostly ready. Yeah, just call me anytime or email me anytime. I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, love that. Awesome. Well, we want to let everybody go here, but you've got info there in front of you, so feel free to reach out to Kelly directly. We will also send out again the PowerPoint presentation to you and Kelly's info again. So feel free again just to continue the discussion. But Kelly, such incredible information today, and so much of it in a short period of time. So thank you so much for
It was my
putting this
pleasure.
together. Just so many great helpful tips and nuggets here. So really appreciate your time. Let me
Well,
pray
thank you
for
all.
us, and then we'll let everybody go. Yeah, Lord, thank you so much for just this time together. God, help us not to be overwhelmed with all the material we talked about today, but just nudge us a little bit on maybe one or two things that you want us to focus on, or some steps that you want us to take. And Father, I just pray that as we continue to communicate the incredible work that you're doing through all of us, that you would just help it land in the right place, that you would open the right doors to givers and foundations and so many other groups out there, and that they would respond in a positive and generous way, Father. So we just pray that you would continue to provide the resources that we need to do the work that you've called us to do. Thank you for Kelly. Bless her work in a special way. And thank you for this time today. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We
Amen.
will
Thank you,
catch you
Yvonne.
soon.